Chad Thomas would be the guy that comes to mind for me in the 5 or 6 games that I saw last season, Cam, in regards to production on the field at the DN position.
Yeah, it starts with our starters, not to use the word to define the word, but Chad Thomas and Joe Jackson up front. Those are the two guys. And I mean, I've been saying it for years. Joe Jackson was a cyborg. Joe Jackson was that guy. And that was proven out. 8.5 sacks was good for second among all true freshmen in college football last year. Freshman All-American by pretty much everybody who put up the All-American group last year was Joe Jackson. So, yeah, those two on the outside are just really, really good. Jackson was a 4-star recruit coming out of Gulliver Prep. Should have been a 5-star. But it's kind of the ratings game of he was committed to Miami, and you can't really sell subscriptions to recruiting sites if the guy is committed and he's not going to waver on that. But you saw his talent, and I said it from, you can go back to look at these videos for the last year, 18 months. I've been trying to tell people about Joe Jackson, and he proved it on the field. He's a 5-star kind of guy. And the last 5-star on our team that we signed was Chad Thomas from 2014. So you have really 2 5-star ends out there. And I know people are going to say, well, Gerald Willis was a 5-star, but he was a transfer. Like, that's why I said that we signed, recruited and signed was Chad Thomas. But yeah, Chad and Joe on the outside, again, it's the defensive line is so good. I mean, Kendrick and RJ on the inside are 2 of the top defensive tackles in America. And you got Joe and Chad that are 2 of the top defensive ends in America. I'm not going to call them the best 2, but if you have a conversation about the top defensive end pairings in America, you have to include them in the conversation. I don't care what your allegiance or fandom is, just based on having a brain in your head that works, you have to include them in this conversation because they are those kind of players. Both of them are big. Chad Thomas is 6'5", 6'6" in the 275 range. Joe Jackson is, again, 6'5" in the 240 range, but he's going to add weight, so he's going to be in the 250, 260 range, and you saw what he did with his quickness coming out this year. So, yeah, that's really where it starts, and that starting D-line I would put up against any D-line in America for their talent and production. So those 2 guys are really, really good. You have trusty Trent Harris, who's going to be a senior this year, and he just does his job, and you need guys like that. He makes some plays because he's always in the right spot, and he takes advantage of his opportunities. But, if you're looking to run read option or to do a misdirection play and take that defensive end out of position, you better hope to do it when 33 is not in the game because he is always where he's supposed to be. And it was kind of a joke when Al Golden was here. He said, yeah, he's such a trusty guy, and that's why I call him trusty Trent Harris. But man, I mean, he's not an elite athlete like a Thomas, like a Jackson, like some of these other guys at the position. He's a little bit shorter. He's only 6'2", not 6'5", 6'6", but Trent Harris does his job, and there's something to be said for that. And every time he doesn't blow assignments. He's great in his technique. He's great, obviously, in the preparation game and the understanding what the offensive players are going to do, the systems are going to do. So that's another guy that's just, again, a key cog up front, and he can play snaps at a number of positions up front, so that really helps out. Demetrius Jackson was a basketball player in high school at Booker T. Washington, Chad Thomas's teammate in high school and also in college. He's about 6'4" in the 250 range. He plays, defensive end also. And, I mean, he flashes great athleticism from time to time. He's still learning how to be a football player at the collegiate level because he only played 1 year of high school. So this is only going to be his, fifth year, of playing football. So, yeah, he's a redshirt junior. Has all the tools in the world and really did take a step forward because he was pretty much in a developmental place where it was maybe 8 snaps a game previously. He could play a little bit more than that now. But, yeah, so he adds into that position group as well. You could put you could put McIntosh or Willis from the inside position to the outside in situations if you needed to, but we have enough depth up front that we don't really need to do that. Coming in this recruiting class, 4 stars, DJ Johnson from Sacramento, Luther Burbank High School, the most offered recruit in the 2017 class, claimed more than 100 offers, and all of those were verified because you can't really go claiming, oh, well, I had 100 teams who gave me offers, and nobody say, wait, we didn't give you an offer. So I don't know what those coaches did, but this kid is good. He's 6'5", 240, runs about a 10.6, 10.7 in the 100 meters for his high school track team. I think that his personal best in a meet was 11.2, I want to say, in the 100. But if you're 6'5", 240, you shouldn't be moving like that, man. I mean, he's good. He was Under Armour All-American. He played outside and inside in that game, a little bit of pretty much every technique except for nose tackle along the defensive line. So he has positional versatility that could come in handy as well. He's going to be here in May. You have Jonathan Garvin, another 4-star from Lake Worth High School, and he's just a beast also, a little bit of a different kind of end. I would put DJ Johnson in the Chad Thomas category of defensive end, and Jonathan Garvin in the Joe Jackson category of end, so playing that Viper position, more of that speed rusher. And that's what he does well. If you look, the University of Miami put up this great website. I forget the name of it. I think it's MiamiSquad17.com, I want to say it is. But they had former Hurricanes players come in and do YouTube videos and interviews of where they evaluated the current enrollees or the signees for this 2017 class, which is pretty cool. So you had Jonathan Vilma, who played linebacker at Coral Gables High School, University of Miami, Super Bowl champion with the the New Orleans Saints, longtime NFL player. He evaluated Jonathan Garvin, and he couldn't keep going with his statements because every snap, John Garvin's first 3 steps had him around the corner and bending towards the quarterback. Like, he was just around that tackle all the time. He's 6'3 and a half, 230 pounds right now, so he can add some weight, but he's strong, big hands, uses his hands well, and his first 2-3 steps are just elite short area quickness for a defensive end. So you have all those guys in the position group up front. I think that I'm missing maybe a couple of guys as I look up the scholarship matrix. Again, that's on SaveTheU.com. You can look that up. It's right on the front page. Am I missing anybody that I need to really talk about on the defensive end position? Scott Patchen is a redshirt sophomore. He's dealt with knee injuries pretty much since his senior year of high school. He's just been injured. He played, I think, like 9 snaps last year in the Florida State game, was his only game, and then he injured his knee again and he was out. But this is a kid who is a Miami legacy. His dad played here. His brother was the black sheep of the family and went to the University of Florida. I have no idea on God's green earth why he would do that, but whatever. But Patchen is another guy who has talent if he can stay healthy. He was a 4-star recruit coming out of IMG Academy. He was teammates with Ryan Fines in high school, which is what put Miami on to Fines because we needed depth at defensive tackle. But yeah, Patchen is a guy who can play here. And I mean, his first snap of his college career was in the Florida State game, and they ran a tackle and stunt, and he got pressure on the Florida State quarterback. He blasted him actually and forced an incompletion on his very first snap of his college career because he missed his freshman year with the knee injuries, redshirt, coming back for that. So his first snap, against Florida State, pass rush, boom, I'm in there on the quarterback. So if that doesn't prove that he can play at this level, I don't know what will. But again, he needs to stay healthy. Patrick Bethel was a 4-star recruit. He's also a Hurricane legacy. His father, Randy, played tight end here and was on a couple of the national championship teams in the late 80s, early 90s. His first snap of college was a punt block in the season opener. I believe it was against Florida A&M University. So he played sparingly this past year because there's just so many guys in front of him with talent. So defensive end has, I want to say, even more talent than defensive tackle does. And that's a blessing and a curse. I think that maybe one of these guys is going to have to take a red shirt this year just because there are not going to be enough snaps for them, because guys like Joe Jackson and Chad Thomas need to be out there as much as possible. Guys like, Jonathan Garvin, he's an early enrollee. He's going to force his way on this field. DJ Johnson, he's just so versatile and so good. He's going to force his way on this field. So I think that, maybe some guys are going to be a little unhappy, kind of like Cortel Jenkins reportedly was last year, of not getting that many snaps. But, this position group is really indicative of the level of talent coming back to what it should be for the Miami Hurricanes, where, every recruit comes in and thinks and has the ability really to come in and play. So these older guys, whether you've been here with Coach Cool or not, you better be busting your ass, because if you don't, there's an All-American or 2 or 3 coming behind you for your job. So yeah, there's so much talent on the defensive line from top to bottom. Even if we sustain a couple injuries like we did last year, I think that the defensive front is going to be a strength for Miami, and it's just going to get better and better over time.
And I think that's a great point that you just made right at the end there, Cam, that if you are by far the most talented guy in the positional unit, maybe you go 80-90% and you know you're good to go because you're just that much more talented than everyone else. But these guys feed off of each other and kick each other in the rear and make each other go when you know that there's 3 or 4 other guys just as good as you, if not better. And you better know your assignment. You better be busting your tail to keep a job or keep in the rotation.
Yeah, I mean, you got to do it. I mean, you saw last year Standish Dobard wasn't getting snaps at tight end behind David Njoku and Chris Herndon. So he flipped over to defensive end. We did have a couple injuries, and, he only played late in games, fourth quarters. But, when he got a tackle in the bowl game, the whole sideline erupted, and his whole position group met him at the sideline and was cheering for him and everything. So it is this, sense of brotherhood and everything. But yeah, you really do have to really bring your A game, because if you don't, there's another guy who's going to be there, going to take those snaps. It's almost the defensive line. If we just isolate that group, ends and tackles, it's kind of like Kentucky basketball was, I want to say, the 2015-16 season, where they just had so many guys, they would play like 6 minutes and be like, okay, sub out the entire group. And they would extend the lead, if not keep that lead, because all of those guys that they brought in off the bench were McDonald's All-Americans, 4- and 5-star recruits. That's the same thing that Miami has on the defensive line now. It's not going to be like when, there were guys here who really couldn't play here in the Al Golden era, and you see them come across the sideline and the whole stadium groans like, oh my God, what's this guy doing out here? Every guy who comes in this game is going to be a guy who can make a play, who can get a sack, who can force a fumble, who can, fill a gap, who can get a tackle for loss, who can do what we need them to do up front to an elite level. And we're just stacked on the defensive line, and it's great.
So, Cam, the other takeaway I have from this, among many, is that as I go through my annual offseason drill of ranking the top 10 at every position in the nation, that if I don't include Jackson and Thomas at D end, I need to have my head examined. If that's not the case anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it just guys. I don't know if you're going to do individual or not, and I could see the case for individually those guys being in the 10 to 20 range, just because, you can have one outstanding defensive end at Podunk U who could, be a better draft prospect or, be ranked above them. But as a tandem, you're not going to have them Jackson and Thomas or Norton and McIntosh on the inside. Neither tandem of starting players, you're not going to have them outside of the top 5 of their position group nationally. Either one, ends or tackles, just because they're that good. And this is not me being a homer. And that I've said there are guys who should not play here. In years previously, when we started doing these videos, maybe in 2014-15, when Miami was not very good, I had to, kind of eat some crow and say, well, we're just going to try and get by. I'm not exaggerating this. And, I got in a Twitter battle with a guy who was talking about NFL draft stuff and kind of bashing Corn Elder, saying, look, I cover this team on a daily basis for the last 3-4 years. Like, I've been around, I talk to guys, I talk to coaches down here. I go to or watch every single game. Like, I get that there are other players who are good out there. I get that there are other teams and tandems that are good out there. But the starting 4, and if you separate the tandems to ends and tackles, that is a top, any way you want to put it, is a top 5 group, whether all 4 ends by themselves, tackles by themselves. The defensive line is just really good right now.
So at both D end and defensive tackle, and both talking quantity and quality, Miami seems to be set for 2017. We are breaking down each position for the Canes, leading you up to the beginning of spring practice, along with Cam Underwood from State of the U. Cam, we appreciate it.
No problem. Always good to be here, and always a good time to go to stateoftheu.com for all of your Miami Hurricanes coverage needs.